Do any members wish to declare any interest in relation to any matters included on today's agenda? No? Fabulous. Exclusion of the press and public. Does Cabinet agree to retain the items listed in Part 2 of the agenda as confidential items as defined by the Local Government Act 1972, and as such to request members of the press and public and any members or officers who don't have a direct interest in the items to leave when these items are reached today? Agreed, thank you. Does Cabinet agree to the minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record? Councillor Allen.
Just to prove that we do read them, my surname is misspelt on page 20.
Thank you very much. Correction noted. I will turn now to my chair's communications. I am delighted to introduce today's business and particularly pleased to see weekly food waste collections, daily in some cases, included on the agenda. We know recycling and reducing our impact on the environment is important to so many of our residents, and that there has been frustration that so many have been wanting to do their bit by reducing food waste but have not been able to because they've not been supported yet by this council. In fact, only this morning on BBC Radio Sussex, I was asked, how can a city that's had 2 green councils still fail to collect food waste? A very good question. That is about to change, and if approved today, food waste collections could start as early as September this year, thanks to funding from central government and a £1.2 million investment by this Labour Council. Increasing recycling is a real priority for our Labour administration, and this new collection will make a genuine difference. In Brighton and Hove, around a third of household rubbish is food and drink waste, around 2.8 kilograms per household each week. Once up and running, this scheme will mean every home in our city, whether living in a curbside or communal area, will be able to recycle their food waste. Despite promises from previous administrations, our recycling rates have been historically and stubbornly low compared to other local authorities, and we are determined to improve this. Our new collections would help us do just that. Early this year, we also expanded the range of things that residents can recycle, and trials for new sorting processes have been taking place. Getting additional materials, including food waste, out of the general refuse will boost our recycling rates, and the food waste collected in this scheme, excitingly, will be turned into compost to use in and around the city. Residents have been demanding improvements in this area, and we are now delivering them. Waste collection is an area residents rightly expect an efficient and regular, reliable service. Unfortunately, in recent months, this has not always been the case. We have seen the unwelcome return of unreliable garden waste, recycling and rubbish collections, and we are tackling this. This falls below our expectations for the service and are frustrating because I know how hard so many of our valued colleagues within environmental services are working to turn things around. Today's agenda includes a report on steps we're taking to change the culture within this service and the significant investment we are making alongside. We have some fantastic staff in our environmental services department who want to serve the city and provide a great service. But sadly, we discovered on taking office in May 23 that the service had some deep-rooted issues that had existed for many years, even decades. We're determined to address these issues and make the changes that this service and our residents have been crying out for so long. Significant efforts are now being made to achieve this, and we will reach the level of service that our residents expect and deserve. But we are still experiencing concerning behaviour from a minority of people who seem determined to undermine the efforts of colleagues desperate to deliver a better service for the people of Brighton and Hove. This should perhaps not come as a surprise to anyone who has read the KC report, which we published towards the end of 2023, and which was commissioned after receiving whistleblowing complaints when we first took office. As many will be aware, we fully accepted every single recommendation made in the KC report and implemented an action plan, which we will be discussing further today, to address systemic issues, including those of racism, misogyny, bullying, harassment, and to stamp out a highly toxic culture that had been left to fester. The report found that many of the individuals accused of these and other deeply inappropriate behaviours were either GMB reps within the council or among a small group of around 10 white men who were described by the KC by witnesses as have been particularly protected by the GMB reps within the council. The report and its findings, however, were just the start. Sets of knives, nunchucks, baseball bats and a samurai sword were found at the depot in the office used by the GMB branch. One of their reps was charged after brave female witnesses came forward. However, the CPS discontinued the prosecution, a decision the CPS has acknowledged was wrong in law. The GMB branch has never offered any explanation as to why so many violent weapons were found in their office, nor any action that they may or may not have taken in response. And it doesn't stop there. Over the last 18 months, we have seen direct sabotage of vehicles, threats to life, intimidation, and the same bully boy tactics. Last year, before a particularly bad period of disruption, the GMB Sussex Twitter account warned of chaos, and I quote, coming to Brighton, directly before we saw further deliberate defecting of vehicles. While this tweet was hastily deleted after it was reported to police, we've again had no explanation from the GMB branch. What chaos were they talking about? Was it the sort of chaos that compromises workers' safety, the very opposite of what any law-abiding and decent trade union branch is supposed to do? If so, then that is gangsterism and not trade unionism. The list of criminal or unacceptable behaviour is long. Last summer, a depot manager's car tyres were slashed, along with sickening direct threats to their life and the lives of their family members. My promise to fellow councillors, colleagues and residents, and indeed those who still seem determined to undermine our service, is simple. We will not bow down or buckle in the face of such appalling behaviour. Each act of sabotage or intentional disruption to our service just makes us more determined to stamp it out. Today's report not only reiterates that commitment, but it also shows what positive steps we have taken and will take over the coming weeks and months. We have made great strides in improving the culture, and we are committed to a schedule of modernisation which will help our teams improve collection rates. I would like to thank residents for their ongoing patience as we undertake the overdue transformational work that is needed to deliver a consistently high-quality service. Anyone who thinks they can stand in the way of much-needed progress should think again. We will support colleagues, invest in the necessary technology and processes, and do all we can to provide a fantastic service for our beloved city. Lastly, today, in my chair's comms, I want to take this opportunity to say that I am proud to lead what I would describe as a city of friends in a country of neighbours. We are a city of sanctuary that celebrates the extraordinary contributions of our migrant residents, many of whom are valued colleagues here at the City Council. As the descendant of migrants on one side of my family, I understand how interwoven our country's history is with much of the rest of the world. I will always defend the rights of all human beings, regardless of their nationality, and this council is proud to lead the country in our equality, diversity and inclusion programmes, our climate change work, and to proudly fly our inclusive pride flags at every available opportunity. In respect to the recent Supreme Court judgment, while it may have clarified the interpretation of wording in the Equality Act, it has caused confusion, deep anxiety about the provision of services for trans people. I want to make clear to our trans, intersex and non-binary residents and colleagues here at the Council that we hear your anxiety and distress, that many aspects of your daily life and routine have now been thrown into uncertainty. The Supreme Court judgment made very clear that the Equality Act protects trans people from discrimination and harassment, and that this principle must be upheld as the government considers the judgment and its next steps. As drafted, the update provided by the Equality and Human Rights Commission would seem to create serious difficulties for trans people and their ability to access services and live with dignity. Brighton and Hove City Council will fully participate in the consultation on the full guidance when published to ensure that those protections against harassment and discrimination of the Equality Act endorsed by the Supreme Court are properly upheld. All over. I think we are going to be calling all of the items reserved for discussion. Does the Cabinet agree? Fantastic. Public involvement. I can confirm that we've received no public engagement items for this meeting, so that will lead us on to written members from questions. Sorry, from members. Questions can be found published in the addendum. We have 15 minutes in total set aside for member questions this afternoon. And once we reach time, I'll move to the next item and written responses will be sent for the remaining questions in the usual way. We've received 41 member questions for this meeting, so I will rotate through those members in attendance, asking you to each ask your first 2 questions as the fairest way to manage the questions. And if there are time, I'll take further questions in rotation. Councillor McClay, yes. It's not working.
Thank you. Our colleague, Councillor Sykes, wasn't able to make it here due to an issue at his other work, and he wondered and requested if we could ask his questions on his behalf, even if that was just 2 of them. It was a very last-minute decision he had to make.
Happy for you to ask those instead of the questions you would ask. It could be efficient.
Ideally,
yeah,
okay.
The time is for the Green councillors to ask their questions.
We'll try and ask as many as we can between ours and his.
Yes.
First 2 of Councillor Sykes's and Pickering's.
So I think the first 2 I've got are Councillor Sykes's.
Okay. So just to clarify, I can ask Councillor Sykes 2, and then I'll have my own 2 at some point later.
Well, we have 15.
Okay. Fantastic. Sorry, slightly complicated matters here. Right, so question 18 from Councillor Sykes on improving the culture of environmental services. And the question reads, the council leader said in comments in her 22nd of April 2025 Argus article about issues at the depot, where she writes of challenging the GMB about the GMB tweets threatening chaos, after which the GMB tweets were deleted. She said, this is gangsterism, not trade unionism. Will the leader confirm whether, if she believed that the tweets may have been made by someone connected to criminality, she first informed council officers or Sussex Police of her intention to approach the perpetrator and take matters into her own hands? Thank you. Sorry for my stumbling. It's not my wording.
Thank you, Councillor West. And this is not directed at you, but at Councillor Sykes. I find this question deeply distasteful, implying as it does that I'm not somebody to follow due process and the rule of law, or at worst, that I'm corrupting the criminal process in some way. To be crystal clear, we report every and all instances of suspected criminality immediately to the police. Given that I'm the first leader to take serious action on this, unlike Green leaders, I'm surprised and disappointed that of all of the angles and all of the questions that Councillor Sykes could ask about this very important subject, this was the question that he chose. Where is the concern for staff dealing with criminality? Where is the show of support for our administration taking this on after decades of silence and inaction? Where is your call for the GMB branch to sort its house out? I find the approach quite staggering, if I'm honest. Talk about completely missing the point. There is an ongoing process of continually sharing information with partner authorities, including the police. All instances of alleged criminality are reported to the police immediately.
Thank you for your response. I'm sure Councillor Sykes will be delighted with that. The second question for Councillor Sykes is number 22, regarding food waste and recycling. There is no detailed timetable for implementation in the report. What are the different stages? How many will there be? Which areas will be trialled first? How will the council collect and monitor feedback to assess issues and changes needed before full implementation? The report is very much lacking in detail, and we are just 10 months away from a new citywide service being added to a department which is currently in deep distress and unable to manage existing collections. This is not good enough, and more detail is urgently needed. When will detail of this level be shared by the administration, or is the answer that plans are still being worked up? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Okins.
Thanks, Councillor West. I'll be fairly brief as I'm going to be dealing with some of this in my opening remarks around the report, but essentially a project plan has been already developed for a phased rollout to commence in September 25, and as I said, I'll go into a bit more detail about that later in the meeting. We will announce details of the first and second phase in proper detail at the beginning of June, and the timetable is going to be indicative because, as you suggest, we want to make sure that we learn as we go and get it right, and as such, as we roll out, as we go through the phases of rollout, we'll be taking decisions on whether and when to carry forward the next part of each phase. And there's good decision in place to confirm that everything is lined up for each phase. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Okins. I've got Councillor Macleay with your questions next.
Thanks very much. Question 24, the progress report for fire safety compliance and actioning FRAs in high-rise buildings is currently in red in terms of direction of travel and meeting the expected date of compliance. Is there a plan to remedy this to meet the compliance date, and how will the team manage this?
Thank you for your question, and it's a very important question. Those ones in red, we don't want to be alarmist about this because it's either green or red. If it's not completely compliant, we're not going to give it a green, so we're still working on it. So there's no amber in between, but it is important all the same. Now, as outlined in our report in 2024, the council completed a large number of fire risk assessments in a compressed time frame. And this is best practice to undertake these fire risk assessments for high-rise blocks every year, which we do. And in 2025, a more phased approach was adopted with assessments scheduled from January to September. And this change supports a better planning coordination of both assessments and resulting in remedial actions. The current red rating for FRAs in high-rise reflects this approach, and with the expected date of compliance being September 2025. Hope that helps. Thank you.
I'll just ask on 23 as well. It is suggested in these papers that the cabinet model was to support more timely joined up decision making while preserving transparency and public engagement. Could the cabinet member for Housing New Homes explain why a year on the council continue not to publish FRAs online or share them with residents?
Thank you for your question. And of course, we fully support the principle of transparency in fire safety and recognise the importance of making fire risk assessments accessible. We do have a full set of up-to-date risk assessments for all our properties, but in 2024, we commissioned a new set of fire risk assessments on both our high-rise and our low-rise buildings. We've now updated them for a total of 639 blocks. That's high-rise, medium-rise, low-rise and senior housing. Having completed a large number of these assessments in a compressed time frame, we're now in the process of ensuring that we're publishing an accurate, legally compliant, as well as being shared in a way that is accessible so that residents can meaningfully understand the information. FRAs contain, as you can imagine, technical and sensitive information, and in some cases, details could pose a safety or security risk if shared without redaction. Therefore, we're very mindful of publishing a new regulatory requirements section under the Fire Safety Act and Building Safety Act, and we're mindful of publishing the evolving expectations of the regulator for social housing, and we're encompassing all of that. So hopefully an accessible, fully articulate and detailed assessment risk will be published soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Councillor Williams. I've got Councillor West next.
Thank you. Question 37, improving the culture of environmental services. The report discusses the Colgan recommendations and in many cases quotes the findings and reasoning that led to the recommendation. However, in 3.11 mentions the recommendation to remove member appeal panels, but fails to relate the findings of McGolgan and Doherty, paragraphs 19, 23 and 33 of the KC report, of conflict of interest and political interference by Labour politicians in 2019. And I quote, witnesses indicated that there were close links between the Labour administration and GMB reps. Witnesses described a high degree of interference from politicians in the disciplinary process, allowing panels whose members may have received and declared GMB funding to completely unashamedly just reverse officer decisions, end of quote, and City Clean managers expected their decisions to be overturned. Those were all quoted in the report. This serious omission seeks to avoid the obvious conclusion that Labour, not just GMB reps, are responsible for the development of the toxic culture and untouchability of perpetrators at City Clean. Do you agree?
Councillor Okins.
I do not agree, no. The KC report is included as a link in the Cabinet report, and we invite anybody who hasn't already done so to read it in full. It was a Labour majority administration that commissioned this report, published it, accepted all of its recommendations, including the removal of member appeal panels, and is now doing the hard yards to tackle the problems that have existed for decades, once and for all. It was also this Labour majority administration, along with the Chief Executive, who apologised to our staff and City for what they have endured. And if the Green Party would like to apologise for their role, I'm sure it would be welcomed in all quarters.
Thank you, Councillor Okins. Councillor West.
I'm not sure the Labour Party has apologised, it's the administration they've done. Question 38, which is similar to Councillor Sykes' one earlier. And it's unfortunate that the report doesn't include all the information that we are criticising it for failing to have. So my question is, given the scale of the undertaking for City Clean to successfully implement a whole new collection service for food waste in March 2026, and the complete lack of detail presented in the thin Cabinet report on how this will be successfully achieved, are Cabinet confident that they are showing due diligence and good governance in agreeing a recommendation 2.1 for the rollout on the basis of what appears to be effectively handing council officers a blank cheque? Are we to regard this as a transparent and competent approach to public administration? And I think, as this was only published a week ago, if there is more information, it really should have been included.
Councillor Okins.
Well, it certainly isn't a blank cheque. I think everything is spelled out in detail in the report, particularly the financial aspects. And on top of that, a robust structure of programme and project management is in place. And I'm regularly briefed on the progress of projects through regular meetings with officers, and I'm therefore very confident the relevant oversight is in place. And it goes without saying, I'll also be providing updates to members and the public as we progress through the project.
Thank you, Councillor Okins. I think we've got Councillor Hill online. Councillor Hill, your question?
Hi, am I audible?
You are.
My first question, which is on improving the culture of environmental services, is what support has been given to council officers who have received death threats and other abuse, asked with particular reference to events this year?
Thank you, Councillor Hill, for an excellent and important question. Councillor Okins.
Apologies. We know what question number that is. There's so many. Oh, it's 39, isn't it? Yes,
At the end,
got it.
certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hill. Very important question. Firstly, I want to thank a very brave group of staff who've showed tremendous courage by speaking out and continuing to work for environmental services in exceptionally difficult circumstances. Whilst you would not obviously expect me to comment on an individual case, I can confirm that any staff affected have been provided with personalised security arrangements, both at work and elsewhere, and offered appropriate and tailored support. All of this is updated on a dynamic basis as and when there is a change in the situation. I'd like to underline how completely unacceptable it is for anybody to be subjected to such threats simply by virtue of going to work each day. We will be continuing our unrelenting efforts to create a safe, respectful and enjoyable workplace for every member of our staff.
Thank you, Councillor Hill and Rokins. Councillor Hill, back to you.
Thank you. My second question is, as the local GMB branch have not apologised for their role in the toxic culture at City Clean, is it appropriate that they should have a seat at the table in City Clean culture change meetings? Have these meetings been productive with the GMB? I'd also agree with Councillor Sankey that the GMB needs to get its house in order.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Rokins.
Thanks, Councillor Hill. The stakeholder group you mentioned has yet to commence. Discussions have started with both of the recognised trade unions, Unison and GMB, about the arrangements and commitments needed to participate in the stakeholder group, and these discussions have not yet concluded.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Thank you, Councillor Rokins. I notice we've got Councillor Pickett with us. I'm sure we've got time for one of your questions, Councillor Pickett.
Thank you, and I apologise for being late. I think I'll go with question 7. Okay, what steps are the administration taking to mitigate sabotage risks of new equipment purchase? For example, what CCTV and monitoring is in place at the depot, and are any additional measures being considered to try and reduce risks further? This question is being asked in the context of not only recent media reports of deliberate sabotage at the depot, but also the frequency of previous issues with vehicles and other incidents, such as fires, which have occurred at periods of disquiet, or close to unsettled periods and disputes at the depot. It is vital that every effort is taken to keep this new equipment not only safe for those using it, but to keep it on the roads doing the job it was required to do.
Thank you, Councillor Pickett. Another very important question. Councillor Rokins, it's 36.
Thank you. Yeah, and if opposition members wouldn't mind just stating the number, because obviously with such a long list of questions, it can be quite difficult to find them at very short notice. But thank you for the question, Councillor Pickett. Glad you could join us today. Security is kept under constant review, and a security specialist is currently undertaking a full assessment of our security arrangements. And given the threats that we've faced, we will of course not comment on all of the measures in place to ensure security, but I can certainly assure you that we take that very, very seriously indeed.
Thank you very much. That brings us to an end. Brings us to the end of member questions. We don't have any matters referred to the executive, so that brings us on to representations from opposition members, and we have Councillor Pickett up first to present the representation on item 207, improving the culture of environmental services. You have 3 minutes to speak, Councillor Pickett.
Thank you. I very much welcome that the administration took heed of the January 2025 Orders report requesting for more openness about the proposed changes for the city's rubbish and recycling service over the past 18 months and calling for this update report brought before Cabinet today. In terms of public oversight, it is indeed essential that this type of information is made publicly available for the process of openness and transparency, and for which those of us outside the Cabinet currently find lacking. It is also good to see the 10 recommendations from the McColgan report addressed with some timeline guidance for achievement. Addressing and eliminating the toxic counterculture that has existed within what was City Clean for some time will be a tough process. Councillor Sankey has stated that culture change doesn't happen overnight, but that she's confident that we will soon see a marked improvement in the reliability of the service. Noting the rising complaints regarding waste and recycling in Preston Park Ward alone, we welcome her confidence. However, I do take exception with the suggestion that it was after the 2023 election that the current administration received a whistleblowing complaint about what was happening within City Clean, when it was abundantly clear from the 2019 Doherty KC report what was going on at the Hinding depot. Doherty had already made comment on and recommendations including terminating the use of councillor member appeal panels, with the collusion of certain councillors, specifically Labour councillors, to allow city clean workers to return to work via the appeals process, despite appalling behaviour in violation of standards of behaviour that, in any other workplace, would have meant clear dismissal and appeal refused. In terms of transparency and truthfulness that this administration claims to support, it is still vitally important that they agree to a further investigation into these accusations. Why is the Doherty report, as opposed to the McLaughlin report, not in public circulation? Why is the suggestion of political interference not being openly investigated as a way of tackling what this report calls deep-rooted issues that have existed for decades? Furthermore, the second recommendation of the 2025 Auditors Report was for the Council to undertake a lessons learned exercise to establish why these behaviours were able to go unchecked for so long, and if improvements may be applicable to other service areas. As of yet, I'm not aware of a lessons learned exercise happening. Therefore, I question the suggestion that Cabinet only note this report. Should there not first be an action to initiate the lessons learned exercise to ensure full compliancy with what the auditors recommended?
Thank you, Councillor Pickett. We now have Councillor Macleay. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Macleay, on item 209, Housing Safety and Quality Compliance Update. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. From reading the Cabinet report, one thing is very clear. Our housing department is overstretched, under-resourced, and struggling to meet compliance requirements. The context of fire safety in our housing is particularly critical. The pace of remediation has been far too slow. And this isn't just a bureaucracy issue. This is making residents fearful in their own homes, and that isn't acceptable. Locally, our challenge is magnified. We have a high density of mid-rise and high-rise buildings, and yet we are completing fewer than half our target fire risk assessments each week in medium risk blocks, just 12 to 15 against a target of 40. This puts residents at potential risk. So how will this administration deliver the increased resources needed to meet these targets with urgency? There is also a critical need for better communication with residents. A tenant in my ward recently told me, people like me don't get to choose where they live. We just have to make do. If they're living in a block with fire risks and antisocial behaviour, they feel trapped and unsafe. We must respect that and communicate with them more transparently. Specifically, we believe the administration should publish FRAs, fire risk assessments, for our 8 large panel system blocks and 46 high-rise buildings, proactively share them with residents. The Information Commissioner, the ICO, made clear back in 2017 that these should be made available. This council used to share them back in 2019. I don't accept the reasons given earlier. I don't think it's good enough. There's been 2 Green MPs repeatedly asking for them to be published. Promises were made in June 2023 and November last year, and there was no follow through. If the leaders of this council believe in resident voice, then we must trust residents with the safety information about their homes. It is concerning that despite the council being aware of many fire action notices needing to be changed as FRIs were completed throughout 2024, that in some cases these notices have still not been changed and residents are living in blocks where evacuation information may be incorrect. What steps will be taken to notify tenants now, and why have these critical updates been delayed? And finally, I just want to talk about leadership. The report rightly notes that the housing team is in a reactive state. Culture and leadership have been flagged as barriers. We cannot afford a stay-in-your-lane culture that dismisses frontline staff suggestions. We need empowered teams, proactive compliance, and leadership that listens. What leadership model are we choosing? One that silences people doing the work, or one that is building resilience, collaboration, and safety? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macleay. We will now move to our first report for this afternoon, Improving the Culture of Environmental Services, and I'm going to ask Councillor Okins to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So shortly after taking office in 2023, we received a set of extremely concerning complaints regarding the culture in what was then known as City Clean, now Environmental Services. Bullying, intimidation, sexual harassment, racism, discrimination, aggressive behaviour, all commonplace and having existed for so long that they had become normalised. Indeed, during my early visits, moments at which you might expect things to be a little bit more restrained, I witnessed people shouting and swearing at each other before the working day had even really got going. Such was the severity of these complaints that we commissioned an independent investigation by eminent human rights lawyer Eileen McColgan KC. The report was published in November 2023 and made for truly disturbing reading. It contained accounts of threats and indeed acts of violence, aggressive outbursts, and even reports of weapons being stored at the depot. And as we heard earlier, those reports turned out to be true when a search of the GMB office at the depot produced a samurai sword, nunchucks, and a set of knives. The KC report made a number of recommendations, and at a committee meeting in January 2024, we voted unanimously to accept them all in full. Since then, we've been implementing these recommendations and, alongside the robust performance management and disciplinary processes, carrying out a culture change programme. It is worth noting that missed collections fell dramatically, around 90% in fact, in the immediate aftermath of the publication of the KC report in November 2023, and then rose again equally dramatically when we began implementing the recommendations early in 2024. These trends are indicative of deliberate action playing a very substantial part of the reliability of the service, and that is supported by instances where sabotage of vehicles has either been confirmed or strongly suspected. However, I want to make it very clear that such action comes from an ever smaller number of individuals who are resistant to the change that is necessary. Having been out on many rounds myself and met many of our staff, I can tell you that the majority work very, very hard. They get up before dawn in whatever the weather is, work long shifts, and just want to provide a good service for the city. I want to make it very clear to those staff that they have our gratitude and our full support. The purpose of today's Cabinet report is to update members and residents on the progress to date in implementing the recommendations of the KC report and the resulting culture change programme, the ongoing challenges and some of the wider steps we're taking and proposing to take to continue to improve the service and make environmental services a safe, respectful and, dare I say, enjoyable place to work. Key milestones on this journey include disciplinary action against those named in the KC report, as well as others who have been found to have engaged in disruptive activity, including the deliberate sabotage of vehicles. Removing member appeal panels, with cases now heard instead by senior managers with no prior involvement in the case. A review of various agreements said to exist but not documented, with processes now in line with council terms and conditions and service operating procedures. A push on recruiting a more diverse workforce, and equalisation of the roles and facilities of the two recognised trade unions. The culture change programme itself has 4 distinct phases. Stabilisation, which involves, along with the robust management of performance and behaviour, an immediate focus on ensuring staff had the support that they needed, having endured such a traumatic experience, and that included some specialist counselling for those who needed it. Creating the conditions for culture change. This included a reset of both behaviour, performance expectations, as well as council and trade union relationships. Culture change, co-creation of the culture and service we want to see done collaboratively with staff, unions, managers and other stakeholders based on psychological safety and a shared vision for the service. And finally, embedding that culture change, making it last long into the future. There's a quote from the report, and I'm quoting here, given the endemic and deeply protracted nature of what has been encountered, embedding change will potentially take between 2 to 5 years to fully secure. So clearly there's much left to do. The Cabinet report described some of the more recent challenges and the various factors that have contributed to the recent spate of disruption in the service. It's clear that we're still dealing with some deliberate action, but there are also other things that conspire to reduce resilience. Among them is the age profile of the fleet, and detailed in the report, we have an unacceptably high number of old vehicles, including 17 that are 10 or more years old, and another 13 that are older than the 7 years recommended as optimum operational lifespan. And incidentally, that's despite us having taken delivery of 10 new collection vehicles since we took over in 2023. This report details the vehicles we intend to procure, including 5 new 26-tonne refuse vehicles and 5 new smaller collection vehicles for use on some of our narrower streets covered by the existing capital programme. As an aside, the report also mentions some of the vehicles we already have on order and will be receiving very soon, including 5 new jet wash vehicles to support our street cleansing and graffiti removal teams. I'm also asking Cabinet to approve a service recovery package totalling 892,000 to provide some additional resource aimed at providing greater resilience. This package includes additional staffing to progress HR processes and alleviate pressure so that managers can be more focused on service improvements, data analysis to better identify trends in missed collections, vehicle defects, and so on, more operations management capacity, training of relief HGV drivers to help plug gaps in staffing without relying on agency staff, and the replacement of non-standard recycling bins that have been a contributor to faults with bin lift mechanisms. And just for the sake of clarity, and as described in the report, this package is funded through a combination of existing service improvement budget, a request from capital receipts through the Council's Transformation Fund, and some supported borrowing. As anyone reading this report will see, our collection service remains a top priority, and we will continue to make the fundamental changes necessary in order to bring about permanent improvements and deliver the service that our residents and businesses deserve.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Councillor Okins. Comments or questions on Councillor Okins' report, Councillor Daniel?
Thank you so much to both Councillor Okins and yourself, Councillor Zanke, for all your leadership on this issue. While there is a way to go, I know that mostly residents report to me an improvement from before you took over, by and large, albeit I can see that some people are experiencing problems still. I think my question is a bit about the geography of the depot, because whilst it's clear that there were individuals involved in creating this culture issue, I think one of the things that I realise is the depot's out on its own. There aren't offices there. We don't see those people all the time. So is there something around making people at the depot feel part of the council as a whole and feel seen, that you'd like to say?
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Councillor Okins?
Yes, that's an astute observation, Councillor Daniel. I think that was something that we were quite wise to very early on. As you say, the staff in that facility are physically separated from the rest of the council, but often they didn't have access to internal council systems and able to sort of stay in touch with access to the wave and all of those kinds of things. We've certainly between myself and leadership, Bella and I in particular, but also senior officers have been going to the depot much more. I mean, I certainly started going on a pretty much weekly basis from the get-go, and I know that we're now holding meetings and other routine business with corporate leadership team, chief exec, and so on at the depot, precisely to try and bridge that gap a little bit and really make our staff at the depot feel like they are a part of the council workforce, just like any other team. So I think that's quite right. I don't know if I'll offer the opportunity for Ali to come in if she wants to add anything, but no pressure to if you don't want to.
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate, some of the things we're doing is making sure that all our staff are digitally enabled and have access to a device. We've also got a major programme of work where we're looking at the physical working environment at the depot. It's a very old depot, it really needs modernising. So we're looking at how we modernise it to make it a really excellent workplace and fit for purpose in terms of providing that important service.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Okins, for the report, and thank you, Chair, for your comments in Chair's communications, which were extremely important and powerfully made. One of the things that I said when standing for election, and indeed upon being elected, to residents was that fixing this service is vitally important, obviously for residents and obviously for our streets and how our city operates. And it's important for us to grapple it, not because it goes against Labour values, but because a well-running, in-house service, a public service provided for the public, owned by the public, and delivering for the public is the most socialist ambition that we can all aspire to. That is a type of socialism, and that is what we as Labour councillors are elected to do, is to deliver superbly run public services owned by the public. And equally, as Councillor Sankey alluded to, some of the behaviours and some of the fact patterns that were outlined in the KC report, not least the storing of weapons in an office, have nothing to do with robust trade unionism. They are, as Councillor Sankey says, worryingly close to criminality or gangsterism. And so we shouldn't feel ashamed. We should feel very proud that we have taken the action that we have, in contrast with the record of previous administrations. And I say administrations. I have two specific questions that I want to ask of the Corporate Director of City Operations, with your permission, Chair. This council has a trade union recognition agreement with the GMB, and one of those provisions says, quite rightly, the council and trade unions are committed to developing a positive relationship based on trust, transparency and respect, in order that they can work constructively together to jointly analyse problems and find solutions to resolve them. So my question to the Corporate Director is would it be consistent with that provision that if the council were to ask a trade union to explain the presence of weapons in an office they had sole access to, that we would expect under that provision for them to be able to answer that?
Thank you. Yeah, we've clearly got a recognition agreement that is absolutely based on trust, it's based on openness, it's based on our aspiration to have a relationship that's based on collaboration. And in the spirit of that agreement, we would want to work and expect to work collaboratively with both our recognised trade unions on such a serious issue in one of our workplaces.
Thank you. And my second question is a broader one to you, Ali, and you've obviously been at the council a while and understand this place, and it's a simple question. Can this service get past these issues? Can we resolve the culture in its current structure, i.e. an in-house service, and can it deliver for residents?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got extremely talented staff right across the service. And I think if we can continue to work with absolute resolute intention to remove some of the barriers that have got in their way and that have existed, we can absolutely succeed. And I think we're on a real road to recovery with the service, and we can absolutely make it a success as an in-house service.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Ali. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Mooten.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Rokins, for your presentation and report. And yes, very thorough. I really want to pick up on a couple of key points, and that is really the first part of my question relates to the ageing fleet, and the second one is to do with the type of vehicle that we're purchasing. So, and in your presentation and in the report of 3.54, there's a very handy bar graph where you state very clearly that with an ageing fleet, you've got 17 vehicles over 10 years old and 13 vehicles between 7 and 10 years old. The recommended age for vehicles in the fleet to be around 7 years or less. And what is very striking, looking at that bar graph, is that there wasn't many vehicles purchased and refreshed within that fleet over many years. And perhaps refer back to Councillor McClay's comment about stay in your lane culture. I wonder if there was a stay in your lane culture under the Green administration, where there was simply no drive to keep that fleet updated, to ensure that we're now what we're faced with now is having to purchase a lot more vehicles at considerable cost. And I'm very pleased that within our administration we've purchased 10 new vehicles since 2023, which is very, very positive to start addressing that fleet. And we've got 5 new vehicles planned for this year. But the concern I have is that with this considerable backlog, let's call it, within the ageing fleet. We now have to work very effectively in our purchasing of new vehicles. Now, last year, Councillor Rokins and myself had the great pleasure of going to the depot and seeing the new EV vehicles for communal bins. It was a real pleasure to see those electric vehicles, to be out in our streets. They're clearly much quieter. They can be recharged and not emitting fuel from the tailpipe, gases from the tailpipe. When speaking to one of the drivers who had been trained and gone out on the rounds in that new EV vehicle, the response from the driver was he was absolutely delighted with this new technology, and said he was happy not to go back to the old fleet. He was really very impressed by the EV technology. Now, I'm really understand with the potential for new Euro 6 diesel vehicles. They're very high standard. They're low emission, and those Euro 6 engines are ULEZ compliant. They're robust and therefore much less polluting than some of the very much older fleets. So I very much welcome those the new vehicles coming in as proposed. But it is a concern to me that we're now facing such a backlog by several years of previous administrations' lack of action on this, that we're having now to be slightly constrained and have to go and purchase a number within the budgets that we have, which just perhaps constrains us. So I guess it's a question to you, Councillor Rokins, is are we sort of forced into a corner with this, or is this the best we can do with getting this fleet updated, bearing in mind that backlog and really our ageing fleet to deliver the service, which is ultimately the highest thing we need to aim for?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Newton. You're quite right, and we've been to look at those EVs, and they are excellent. The drivers love them, and there's all sorts of fake news kicking around these kinds of vehicles, that they're not reliable and all that kind of thing. The actual trains have been very reliable. There were some issues with the charging infrastructure, but not the vehicles themselves. There have been some issues with some of the bin lift mechanisms on some of the newer electric vehicles, but those are the same bin lift mechanisms that would have been on vehicles had they been diesel. So they're not; those issues were not directly related to the vehicles being EV. But the bottom line with a service that is so crucial to the running of a city is that obviously your top line has to be maintaining a reliable and resilient service. And we are forced into a corner a little bit. I mean, in an ideal world, we would continue, switching every vehicle over to EV one by one. But we've got two problems at the moment. One is that, as you say, we've got 17 vehicles over 10 years old and 13 over 7 years old, which is the recommended sort of maximum operational kind of shelf life. And clearly, that's a very big proportion of the overall fleet. In fact, it's well over half. And so we need to urgently address that. It's no surprise that the electric HGVs are very substantially more expensive than the diesel ones. So you have a choice of, do you procure a smaller number of electric vehicles, or do you procure a larger number of diesel vehicles? But the other major thing, the major consideration that's kind of also hemming in our options here is that we've just very recently, in the last couple of weeks, had an updated technical assessment of the charging infrastructure at the depot, but also the grid capacity and the substation capacity in the area. And we're basically operating pretty much bang on the upper end of that capacity. So there's a very, very, it would be very, very risky to put in new electric vehicles at this point in time, because it would potentially undermine our ability to be able to reliably charge the ones we've got, let alone the new ones. And then obviously you're introducing a whole new reason for the fleet to be unreliable. So that's why we're seeking to procure in the way that we are. But just for anybody who's interested, and I know that opposition members will be very well aware of our commitment to decarbonisation, given the extent to which we've accelerated progress in the last couple of years since we took over the administration. This does not represent a shift away from decarbonised fleet. It's really, we need to get the service back on track. We need to get the resilience back into the fleet. And we've already started the process of assessing what our options are with regard to getting more capacity into the area, additional substation capacity and so on, so that we can procure further zero emission vehicles in the future.
Thanks very much, Councillor Okins. Councillor Meeting, Councillor Robbins.
I'll just make a very small contribution and comment more than anything. And it touches upon what Councillor Taylor and both Councillor Taylor and Councillor Daniel said about City Clean appearing to be something other than the council. And I'm really pleased to see that we now use the term environmental services rather than City Clean, because I think it did chime in there. And I still, even now, had quite a few emails from residents referring to City Clean and saying, well, why don't you get rid of them and get somebody else to do the job or something, not realising that they were in-house depot. So I think it's great that we now say environmental services much more than City Clean, as if it was something above and different to the council's services.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? I'll just say lastly that, as others have touched on, and as I communicated in my chair's comms at the outset, we know that we have so many incredibly hardworking, very talented, very committed staff that are going over and above every single day to deliver the service, as others have said, working in often difficult circumstances in roles that at the best of times can be very difficult and challenging roles. And we are hugely grateful for their commitment, for their effort and for their service. I think in any council across the country, there is always a slight challenge with ensuring that what is going on in the town halls, in the sort of centre of civic life, is felt and reaches different parts of council operations that are closer to the front line, whether that's in housing services or environmental services. It's a challenge we're very alive to, and I think very much part of the organisation, or the whole organisational culture change that we're trying to bring about, is breaking down silos, genuinely feeling much more like one council, and ensuring that no matter where a council staff member may be based, where they may work, how far away from Brighton Town Hall or Hove Town Hall that might be, they still feel very much included and very much part of our council family. That work is always going to be a work in progress, but it's something that we're very committed to, as Ali has said, both in terms of ensuring that everyone has digital access, improving the physical condition of the buildings where people are working, and making that one of our big priorities. So I just wanted to end on that note. But other than that, is Cabinet happy to accept the recommendations detailed in the report? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. That brings us on to food waste and recycling. And again, we've got Councillor Okins to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so residents, the length and the breadth of the city, have been incredulous for years at the limited range of items we collect for recycling. And the myth that that couldn't be changed because of a legacy waste contract still pervades in many quarters, despite us having already announced the expansion of the service earlier this year. Periodically, the council does what is known as a waste composition analysis, which is a fancy way of saying we open up a load of bin bags and rummage around through the contents. The last one of these was done in 2022 and found that about a third of the waste in the general refuse was food related. 75% of that food related waste was considered to be avoidable, and about 50% of that was still in its packaging. Clearly, getting that waste out of the residual stream and into a circular process is a no-brainer, and our food waste will be combined with the city's garden waste to produce compost for use in and around the city. Many parts of the UK have had food waste collections for years. Indeed, the councils with the best recycling rates are those with food waste collections well established, as well as a large number of gardens. Both of those waste streams are very heavy, and with recycling rates measured by weight, they do wonders for their KPIs. In the budget for the current financial year, we allocated £1.2 million for the introduction of food waste collections, and today's Cabinet report seeks approval to proceed with the rollout of the service. This would be done in 4 phases, which I can describe as follows. Phase 1 would see around 11,000 households in the east of the city starting food waste collections from September this year, if approved by Cabinet today. Phase 2, 29,000 households in the north of the city starting in October. Phase 3, 31,000 households to the west from November. And Phase 4, 67,000 households in central and communal areas in March 2026. I should add the caveat that this timeline is indicative and may move around a little bit. It's obviously very important that lessons are learned during each phase are factored in to the next, and there will be what is described in NASA-type terms as go, no-go decisions ahead of each phase. In curbside areas, residents will be provided with a small kitchen caddy and a year's supply of compostable liners, as well as a larger 23-litre caddy to be placed outside for weekly collection. A great deal of work has gone into identifying appropriate containers, particularly for communal areas, and I understand the anxiety that residents in those areas may have. I'm assured that the preferred units are robust, secure, and have been in use for some time in other towns and cities, and there is more detail on those in Appendix 1. Collections in communal areas, incidentally, will take place daily. Now, I've heard some concerns from residents who live near our waste transfer station in Hollingdean, where the food waste will initially be sent, that the new service might lead to additional problems with odour and traffic in the area. I'm very sympathetic to those concerns, and we'll certainly be monitoring that closely. However, I don't anticipate any issues in that regard. It's important to remember that the food waste is already there. We already collect it. It's just in with all the other waste already tipped at that facility. But as part of the new service, the separated food waste will be stored in sealed containers and be taken off-site to the compost facility much more quickly than the residual waste, often on the same day, and certainly no later than 24 hours after collection. As such, I would expect to see at least no additional odour in the surrounding area, and more likely, an improvement. Similarly with traffic, although there will be a few more vehicles visiting the facility, the general refuse vehicles will be visiting less often as they will be collecting lower volumes. In addition to food waste, I'm also seeking Cabinet approval today to continue the collection of the wider range of materials as part of our mixed recycling collections for the duration of the waste contract, which runs until 2033. The technical team at Veolia have been running trials on the new sorting process, and I'll be updating members and residents on the timeline shortly. And I'm happy to take any questions and comments from members.
Thank you, Councillor Okins. Councillor Alexander.
Mine's more a couple of comments. So I'm really pleased to see that we are finally will be collecting food waste. According to the CEO of the Brighton Hove Food Partnership, why don't the council collect food waste is one of the questions they are most asked. And a citywide food waste collection is also one of the aims in the new Brighton Hove Food Strategy. And talking of the Brighton Hove Food Partnership, and with my food partnership board member hat on, I look forward to a future meeting between us as the council and the food partnership on fully composting our city. As some people will be aware, the food partnership oversees a number of small community composting schemes. And with these small community composting projects and our citywide food waste collection, I think we can really look forward to a whole city circular food waste sort of future. And I think that's really something that we can all be excited for. And I really want to thank you, Councillor Okins, for making this happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to quote, Labour will investigate increasing the range of items that can be recycled and will introduce a food waste collection service. That was from our manifesto, A Better Brighton and Hove for All, published in April 2023, so 2 years ago. And here we are delivering it. Another concrete example of our Labour administration delivering on what our city wants to see. Now, I went to uni in Surrey. I lived in Guildford, and Guildford introduced food waste recycling in 2009 under a Conservative administration. And here we are, Brighton and Hove, that beacon of progressive values, catching up over a decade later. It's better late than never. But when I was in Guildford, it all worked really well. Every house would always have their caddy out, and it was really had high uptake across the borough, both urban and rural, even the students. And so it's thanks to our budgeting and the funding from DEFRA that we're able to do this. And it certainly marks a big step forward in us trying to make a greener, fairer city.
Hear, hear. Couldn't agree more. Councillor Mooton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Rokins, for this report. Very, very timely and valuable. I really want to echo Councillor Allen's comments there. I think our poor recycling rate, notably under the Green administration, was one of the stains of this city. And very embarrassingly, because often when you say you're from Brighton and Hove, people say, oh, you must have a particularly great environmental setting, etc. But because of the previous Green administration, but we have to say, no, we're really woeful when it comes to recycling. So I'm really absolutely delighted that we're moving on, we're getting with the times, as it were, and actually getting the full range of plastics and foils and cartons, and which we can include in our recycling. I'm genuinely excited and incredibly positive about this proposal, and so I want to thank Councillor Rokins and the team for working hard to deliver the manifesto commitment, which we were voted on 2 years ago, and we are now absolutely delivering on. So thank you. I wish to also pick up on a point about food waste. In the section 3.5 of the report, it references UK amounts to 10.7 million tonnes of food waste. 60% comes from households. That's a big calculation. 6.4 million tonnes from household. And that's waste, or 95 kilos per person per year of food waste. Now, I'm absolutely incredibly positive about the fact that we're going to start recycling this via a food waste collection service, and therefore be able to reuse that in a compostable way, etc. That's really positive, rather than allowing this go to the incinerator as it presently does. But I think somewhere we need to also perhaps tackle the root of so much waste and think through how can we encourage and work with communities to think how to not waste so much of the food that they're purchasing. It's a considerable cost, put in their fridge, whatever, and then it's getting wasted. It's not used. Or even working with the supermarkets to think how can we reduce, because they often do buy one 2-for-1 offers and things like that. And then that waste, that food is often wasted because they didn't. People didn't need eat that product. They're happy with just the one, so why don't just sell one rather than two for the price, etc. So I think there may be some work to say, how can we reduce down the amount of waste in the first place? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mooton. Councillor Rokins.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I completely agree. I mean, the first thing to say is that there's some research, I don't know how conclusive it is, but there's some research to suggest that once a dedicated food waste service is up and running, one of the knock-on effects is that it makes people a little bit more mindful of the amount of food waste that they're wasting, and potentially starts to reduce that. But it is difficult. I mean, I if you go into a supermarket, it's there are some loose produce and loose veg and stuff, but a lot of the time, I mean, I try and buy organic food when I can, certainly for my little boy, and a lot of the time you have to choose between 3 courgettes wrapped up in plastic that are organic, or one loose one that isn't, and it's quite difficult to make the sort of you've got quite limited choice in that regard. As you know, Councillor Mooton, we've been doing some work on the circular economy route map that's going to be coming through the system later this year. And as part of that work, we've been approaching and trying to I don't know, strong arm or gently encourage, whichever way you'd like to describe it, the supermarkets in Brighton and Hove to try and suggest that if they wanted to run some kind of trial for packaging-free options and refills and things, then Brighton and Hove might be a suitable place to do it. So I'm sure that many of those CEOs of the big major supermarkets are watching this meeting, so please do get in touch to discuss. The other thing I was going to say has slipped out of my mind, so I'll pass back over to the chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Akins. I've got Councillor Robbins.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair. And as an allotmenteer and also the member of Cabinet who allotments falls under, all this talk of compost obviously gets me very excited. And I just want to put a bid, I'll try and keep calm here. I just want to put an early bid in for if you've got any of this spare compost floating around, if you could give it to us, allotmenteers, deliver it to the allotment sites, we'd be very pleased. Particularly the campsite in Portslade, if you can make a quick note of that. So it's brilliant that we're going to see all this compost, and it's going to come back into the earth and help us grow our own fruit and veg, perhaps, and not have to rely on supermarkets where 3 courgettes are wrapped in plastic, and just rely upon them going and digging them ourselves on a Saturday morning. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have to say I'm really looking forward to one of these lovely storm bins in the communal areas, both where I live and in the other communal areas around. And I think this could really help us with the horrible problem we have with seagulls. On the occasions when we have bins with broken lids, which I think in the earlier presentation, you said there was some money to replace some broken bins, but this will help with the seagull problem because all the food will be locked in this bin with a closed lid. So when they go to the general waste, there won't be any food in there for them to peck away at. So hopefully they'll all fly off to Littlehampton or Eastbourne or something. But anyway, this is absolutely brilliant that this is coming in. This is what residents have been asking for many years. It's the Labour administration that's bringing this in. How good could that be? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Daniel, and then I'll go back to Councillor Aiken.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So there's been a really, generally people that I've spoken to when door knocking are really super excited and are very much about time too, where it comes to this. My grandmother already has food waste recycling, which is, it took me a minute to get used to it, but I soon did, and it works really well. There's no smell. It's completely. That's what I was worried about, flies and smell, but it wasn't like that at all, and it isn't like that. So it works really well. The caddies are amazing. I guess the feedback I get from some areas where they've got communal bins is. Mixed. One was fear that they might be missed out because they really want to participate. They want a low waste economy. They want a net zero green earth. They want to preserve everything. They're really enthusiastic, but they were worried that maybe it wouldn't work in communal areas. And other people in communal areas have the other worry. They're like, what if it's brought into our area and then people abuse it, tip by things, don't bother doing it properly, it gets contaminated. So I guess I'm wondering how you would reassure those two different cohorts in those communal bin areas in particular.
I'll go in reverse order then. So I mean, the first thing to say is that obviously the communal areas will be included. I mean, members will be aware that actually further down the line, there's government legislation that's going to require food waste to be supplied to every household. The Greens seem to be hell bent on. I get that they find it quite threatening, actually, that the realization that they could have done any of this at any point but didn't, and now they're sort of trying to hide behind the idea that we're just doing it because we're being forced to by central government, which obviously isn't true because we're doing it a year ahead of time. The central areas are the most difficult, I suppose, to plan for, which is why we're doing those areas last, to make sure that we've got the service and the whole infrastructure and stuff set up first and running smoothly before getting the communal bins in. And obviously one of the areas of concerns is around the bins themselves. I mean, clearly in communal areas, you've got to have, the daily collections and a bin that is secure, because we all know that foxes and seagulls will get to the bins given the slightest chance. So yeah, you're quite right to raise that. And actually, Joy, I think, Councillor Robinson raised the same thing. There's been a very big focus on the bins being secure, and these particular units, you probably will have seen in the appendix, have removable panels that can be swapped out and replaced. So if lids or other bits get damaged, then they should be easier and quicker to fix than our current communal bins. And in fact, they also even come with an anti-graffiti coating, because we all know that our bins seem to act as magnets for tagging in the city. So that will just make them that bit easier to clean up. The other thing I just want to highlight as well, as by way of reassurance to residents in all areas really, but particularly the communal areas, is that all of the new food waste vehicles will have onboard jet washing units. So if there is any mess that's spilled out onto the bins, around the bins, whatever, it will be very thoroughly cleared up at the time of collection, right there and then. And in the communal areas, that will be every day. So it really should see. And again, coming back to my earlier comments, at the moment, all the food waste is in the main bin. So taking it all out, putting it into a dedicated service, being picked up daily by vehicles with jet washers, really should be an improvement in the general sort of overall picture. That's the intention.
Brill, thank you. Without further ado then, does Cabinet accept the recommendations as detailed in this report on food waste and recycling? Very enthusiastically, thank you everybody. So final report for today is Housing Safety and Quality Compliance Update, and I've got Councillor Jill Williams to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, I would like to just get this into context, because this is, even I knew, but I'm still quite surprised at this. So over 23% of our council housing stock was built before 1946, and 62% of council stock built before 1966. Over time, sadly, budget constraints, etc., have contributed to a historic underinvestment over many years. And I'm really sad to say that this has taken some time in previous administrations to be addressed or even recognised. Now, we are where we are today, and we are all aware that last summer the regulator of social housing judged that the council have not met the new national safety standards. All these properties that we are a landlord of were built before any of these standards were put in place, so it's no surprise there. And I am really sad that, our residents are having to live through this as we are. But what I can say is, although we have a way to go, I am really proud to be in an administration that have taken action against this and are working extremely hard to get over 12,500 households up to scratch. And it is by no means an easy feat, but we are working very hard towards that. And this is what this paper is noting. We're not there yet, but we've made huge strides to get there. And I'm very proud. And I want to thank all of the staff that's involved in this, because it really is a huge operation. So I want to thank everybody involved. And I do want to just raise a couple of points that was mentioned in the representation by Councillor Clay. Absolutely, we did a root cause analysis, which is part of the programme. What's going on? What went wrong? What can we do to stop this getting to this position again, and making sure we're compliant in the future for the safety and well-being of our residents, which is extremely important to us. And absolutely right, it was identified that there was a need for a leadership and culture change within our corporate environment. And I'm pleased to say that we have done just that. We have been working extremely hard with our organisational redesign, not just in housing, but across the whole corporation, across the whole council. I think we've all agreed that this was necessary, and we are achieving that. And again, I'm very proud that we're doing so. And not only that, we're having a clearer focus on safety, compliance, workforce well-being, which is really important. We've got to look after our staff, as we've realised in our environments as well. And they, to help them achieve better for our residents, and that's what we've been doing. So we've been introducing supervision structures to ensure our staff feel safe and supported in raising concerns. So yes, this is very serious, but we are taking account and we are being accountable to what is needed to happen in the future. But I, for one, am really proud of what we've achieved so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams, for the update. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. So this regulatory judgment is very serious, and I know that Councillor Williams is robust in her drive to remedy all the issues that have been laid bare. It tells us something quite stark that our residents have known for a long time, which is that our council housing hasn't been healthy homes. Damp, mouldy and unsafe housing are not just housing issues, they're public health issues which contribute to respiratory illness, mental health decline. And it's sadly an emergency really up and down the country with our ageing housing stock, which has been underinvested in for decades. But the fact of the matter is that the administration here is not standing still. The report, which Councillor Williams has very eloquently presented, lays out a clear path forward, which I really welcome. It's rooted in honesty, driving forward systemic change, and listening to the residents, which we're here to try and help. And so the investment in health and safety compliance, including in new fire safety teams, is really good. Programme of inspections, really good. And it's all part of a drive to really fulfil our corporate plan vision, to have healthy homes for people. So we're not managing decline, we're building trust, and it's a chance to be really transformational. So I thank Councillor Williams for this report.
Thanks very much, Councillor Allen. Councillor Taylor.
Echo those comments from Councillor Allen. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for the report. I just thought I'd give some ward perspective from Walsingham and Bevan-Dean. I'm the councillor for. We have one of the highest stocks in the city, and I think it's safe to say the highest number of emails that I get and inquiries is probably around housing repairs. It does come in a lot, so I just wanted to focus on that element of the report and our focus on our remediation. And it is good to see that things are going in the right direction. And speaking with Martin and Jeanette, I know there's a real focus on getting those repairs over 28 days getting down. There will always be a book of repairs, given the nature of the stock and, by the way, the size of the stock, but it really does have an impact on residents, as Councillor Allen was hinting at. You know, some are small things, some are large things, but when they drag on, it does have an impact. It has an impact on the way people live their lives. It has an impact on mental health. It has an impact on family life. So I just really want to reiterate to residents that this is not something that we're ticking a box on or just hoping that officers will get right. We're really, really focused on it. We did, within the budget that we passed, I believe, allocate an additional £1 million within the HRA to accelerate those repairs on existing stock, which is really important. And I think it tries to show to residents, as Councillor Allen says, that we're both being honest about this and that we're not saying, oh, everything's absolutely fine and, you know, here's the reasons, here's the excuses. No, we're acknowledging where we are, and we're putting in money and we're putting in focus to get this right for residents, because, as I say, it does have a huge impact on their lives. And they are paying council tenants, by the way. They pay council rents, and they deserve to have a good service and a good home. And that's what we're all aspiring to. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm going to come to Councillor Robinson in a moment, but I just wanted to reflect on that point. And I think it's important, you know, really to put on record, exactly as you've said, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Allen as well, that we are recognising that things have not been as they should be, that has been the case for some time, that there is clearly resident frustration about the fact that many of the issues that we have uncovered through doing root cause analysis and through taking this transformative approach we're now taking have been being identified by our residents for a really long time. I know myself from my ward work that there are residents in my ward in Wish that have been really let down by the service. And I also know from speaking with them just how much of an impact it can have If you're not comfortable in your home, if you don't think your home is safe, if you have real concerns and your repairs aren't being done, it can have a very harrowing effect on people's emotional well-being, on their mental health. And as Councillor Allen says, this is a public health issue. So to echo, as others have said, it's very important that we are regularly monitoring the work that is going on. I feel confident that we are taking a systems approach to putting things right, which is exactly what doing a root cause analysis is all about, not just patching things up, not just ticking a box, but really fundamentally changing how we deliver the service and really centering residents in how we do that. And I'm confident that we are doing what is necessary and we will get there. But, it's important to be clear, this is still a work in progress and we acknowledge that. Councillor Robinson, were you next?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, similar to what you were saying. So we're the housing team are working on a lessons learned approach. What I'm particularly pleased to hear about is that we're recognising when contractors have failed, and we're bringing in some of those tasks in-house, and we'll be recruiting our own staff. That will be particularly good for things like apprenticeships going forward. So yeah, this is where the service are being very mindful of the better ways perhaps to provide the best service to our customers.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Williams, for this presentation and report. Very helpful to understand, but also very hard in one level as well. And when you consider the 12,500 residents that we have in council properties, and the historic underinvestment for so many years, as you describe, to some it may just be a number, a backlog. Oh, we got these number of tasks to do. But as Councillor Sankey rightly reflects, is that it affects emotional well-being and people's mental health when they see something undone for such a time, and just deep frustration. Why can't the council just fix this? It's not that hard. Why can't they come and do it? And there's the idea of a backlog of so many tasks. It needs this extra money, and I'm very pleased that this year's budget, the HRA budget, has been increased by additional £1 million to really drive the change. And in the context of the cultural change and redesign that this council is delivering on and achieving, we will start. I believe residents will see the difference we're starting to do. So we're absolutely essential. One point to reflect on also is that if you've got a backlog, since you responded to reactive repairs, you're being told that means doing those urgent things and leaving the small things for later, because it's all been a bit a very much reactive program, just sort of doing the bare minimum almost if you're not enough resource in it. With this additional resource, you get the catch up of the backlog, and then you start doing more proactive repairs and planned repairs, and actually get some efficiencies. And I think I believe in my ward, Goldsmith ward, you've got two tower blocks, the Clarendon and the Ellen House tower blocks, and through a more proactive approach, we can look at replacing and repairing the water riser, which rises up the whole building, rather than doing it on a piecemeal approach. We can actually start doing a planned approach to tackle some of the bigger tasks as well, which will also need doing. So I very much welcome this additional funding of this, and I very much welcome the culture change and moving from a reactive back foot approach to a very much a proactive and getting much more done and really serving our residents much better.
Thank you, Councillor Mooting. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, and I appreciate your very informative and helpful comments. And I just wanted to add to that, we sort of took over. We had 9,653 repairs backlog, and that's now down to in the 3,000, and that's actually taking on new repairs. So you can see what a huge job it is. But we're not finished. We've got a long way to go. That's very true. But thank you for your comments.
Councillor Alexander.
I have to say, in the last sort of 2 years, I can say as a ward councillor, I have really noticed the improvements in the last few months. In fact, I had an elderly gentleman in Moulscombe contacted me recently. He had steps in his front garden which had become unstable, and he was really worried about falling on them. He contacted me. I put them through the case management system. 3 days later, he contacted me, said, I just thought I'd let you know the council are in my front garden fixing my steps. And I thought, yes.
That is fantastic to hear. Thanks very much for sharing that, Councillor Alexander. And that is exactly where we need to move to. Any other comments or questions on the update from Councillor Williams? Councillor Robbins.
Well, yeah, just quickly to make a couple of comments. First comment would be how much I agree with you, Bella, Councillor Sankey, in that there is nothing really more important than having that feeling of being able to get home and feel safe and protective, and to be able to shut the door and think, well, that's the outside world closed out now, at least until I have to face them again tomorrow. So it really is important that. But also, it seems to me there's a bit of a theme here this afternoon. We've looked at improvements at environmental services. We've looked at improvements in recycling collections, and now we're looking at these improvements that we're making there. And it seems to me that perhaps the last administration didn't do too much wrong. They just didn't do too much at all. And it was easier to do nothing than actually tackle these things. And I think sometimes we're now finding that we're getting perhaps not over criticised, but because we're actually doing things rather than saying, well, let's not bother with that. Let's try and kick it down the road and hope it goes away. So I think this afternoon, if nothing else, has proved that we're looking wide and far across the range of various things and actually trying to make a difference and trying to do what's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Robbins. Any more questions or comments for Councillor Williams? If not, then can I propose that we accept the recommendations detailed in the report? Does the Cabinet agree? Agreed, thank you. Does Cabinet agree to the Part 2 minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record? Agreed, thank you. And does Cabinet agree that the items listed in Part 2 should remain exempt for disclosure to the press and public? Agreed. Thanks very much, everybody. I will draw this meeting to a close now.